Hi, everyone. Today is April 16th. It's about quarter to 2 Central Time. Due to a technical glitch, I wasn't able to record the earlier webinar that I held for clients, colleagues, and friends about an update on the CARES Act and the new legislation that we received, or the new guidance we received about independent contractors and sole proprietors being eligible for the PPP program. So I'm going to record this summary of what we discussed and what the changes that have gone on in the program since the last time we talked, so they can be posted just for those people that weren't able to make it to the call, and I apologize for that. Thought it would set it up to record it automatically, and the wonders of technology, it didn't happen that way. So where are we at today? This morning, the SBA announced that the PPP program funds had been completely spoken for and allocated. So $350 billion has been accounted for, allocated to small business applications that have been filed since April 3rd. So it took 13 days for that program to be exhausted. The SBA is not taking new applications as of this point in time. And with politics in Washington being what they are, who knows if any applications will be processed anytime soon. Without funds, there's no reason for them to allocate or to continue to work on funding problems. So hopefully you were able to get in before this happened, and you don't have another cloud of uncertainty over you and what's going to happen in the future with your business, and things will work out. On the assumption that there will be some additional funding that they'll figure it out politically at some point in time, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the guidance that we received and what we're hearing about the CARES Act. So before the funding ran out this morning, the information that I had from colleagues across the country, from my local regional banks that I have contacts with, were that the really large banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, seem to be struggling immensely with this program, and people aren't getting approvals from the SBA. There's questions as to whether applications are submitted or not properly, and whether they've been actually given to the SBA for approval. And there is just a ton of uncertainty. So for a lot of people working with larger banks, my suggestion would have been, you need to go to a local regional bank. You need to establish a relationship so that you can call somebody and conduct business that way. I'm really fortunate here in Iowa that I have a number of banks that I work with, and I can call a banker. I know who they are, they know who I am, and we are able to have conversations about what's going on and get problems solved. So if you're in a big bank and you don't have a banker, I wish you the best of luck, but you need to assess that banking relationship and determine if it's really in your best interest to stay with them. That's all I can say, or to maybe need to open up an alternative and not do all your banking with one bank. The local regional banks are spitting money out. The SBA statistics as of April 13th were that 4.3% of the money has been released to the public. Now, the law contained a provision that the money had to be released in 10 days from the acceptance of an application by the SBA. So, for instance, in my case, I submitted my application materials. I had to submit some additional documentations because the documentation requirements were changing. My application was accepted April 7th. So I'm supposed to have funding by tomorrow. I contacted my banker yesterday, and he informed me that I'll be hearing from processing and that I should receive the money tomorrow. At this point, I've not heard anything about it. And I guess we'll see if that happens or not. I have a concern that maybe banks are holding on to money and playing the float game, making money in the overnight markets from these loan resources that are supposed to be pushed out to small business owners. And I got the impression that if the law allows them 10 days, they were going to take 10 days. And that might be from a processing perspective or or for some other reason. But my fear and suspicion is that they're making as much money off this money as they possibly can. And that's a cynical view, and it's just cynical times right now. So the program, I've had several clients receive money. I have some people that are scheduled for closings tomorrow. So I think that the program works, and I think that it's going to be really beneficial for businesses, at least in the short term. Hopefully they turn the spigot back on here pretty quick, and we can get back to work and doing things hopefully smarter than we did in the past. We've learned, taken this time to reflect and change and adapt. So with that, let's just jump into what the new regs came out. So the law allowed small business or sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed people to file applications starting April 10th. We expected guidance April 8th, April 9th. We did not get guidance until April 14th at about 6 o'clock Eastern time. 15th, I'm sorry. The guidance was released a day and a half ago, so I'm sorry, it was the 14th at 6 o'clock. And the guidance is pretty straightforward. A couple of surprises in there. So, and there's a potential trap for really small business owners. So let's talk about what they can do. So if you're an independent contractor, sole proprietor, or self-employed individual, in order to qualify for a loan, you have to prepare a Schedule C for 2019. Now, I know your return is postponed until July 15th, and you can extend it till October 15th. But if you want the PPP program loans, you have to have your tax preparer prepare a Schedule C form for you for 2019, at least a draft. It doesn't have to be filed, but you have to at least submit a draft with your application. That should show your income and all your expenses and come to a net profit number. That net profit number then becomes your basis for borrowing, okay? If your net profit is zero or a loss, you are not eligible for the PPP program under the regs that were just issued. If you have a profit, the amount of money you can borrow under the program is you take the profit, you divide it by 12, and then multiply it by 2.5. That will give you the amount of money you are eligible to borrow, okay? That's for a Schedule C business with no other employees, all right? The forgiveness aspect of it is on the same grounds as it was for the business. If you remember the webinar we did 10 days or so ago, it talked about the CARES Act program and how you get forgiveness. You could spend the money on payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, or utilities, and those items spent during an 8-week period would be entitled to forgiveness. With the sole proprietor with no other employees, they are willing to forgive owners' compensation, but they have a formula to determine that, right? It's not based on what you spend in 8 weeks. It's based upon a different formula, and that formula is your net profit divided by 52 multiplied by 8. So that number is necessarily less than the amount you're eligible for. So the potential trap for a small business owner is that you have a Schedule C that you don't have any utilities or rent expenses on or mortgage interest. You're a small business, maybe you work out of your home. In that event, you might consider taking the lower loan amount that's completely forgivable that will be tied to your owner's compensation and foregoing the additional money you're eligible for because you can't forgive that money. Now, if you need the money, you take the money, but you can't forgive that portion of it because the regulations make it clear that if you didn't have that expenditure for mortgage interest, rent, utilities on your 2019 Schedule C, you can't use this money for it. So be really careful about that and think about what you're doing. If you're a Schedule C business with employees, you need to do the same thing. You need to complete a Schedule C, and you also need to include your 941 costs. Now, I forgot to mention real quickly, the Schedule C business owner also have to provide 1099s that show the income that you received with your application. So the Schedule C business with other employees needs to do the same paperwork plus the 941 reports for 2019. In both situations, you have to demonstrate that you are in business on February 15th of 2020, okay? And forgiveness is essentially the same way for the sole proprietorship with employees as it is with the sole proprietor without employees. Your forgiveness is what you spend in 8 weeks plus 850 seconds of your net profit for 2019, as calculated by the draft or the actually filed Schedule C return. Now, there's some concern. There's been a lot of concern about how to handle K1 and K1 income. If you are the owner of an S corporation, your K1 earnings are not eligible for the PPP program unless you recognize self-employment income from them. Same with partnerships and LLCs. So in a partnership or LLC setting, you can get self-employment income, you can receive guaranteed payments. But what the regs made clear was in a partnership or LLC setting where there's multiple people with guaranteed payments is that you are not eligible on the individual level. The company has to file and those monies get included into payroll costs. And the cap on that is $100,000 of self-employment income per person. So just be mindful of that if you're a partnership but you have self-employment income, that doesn't make you self-employed and eligible to file a separate application. That still has to come through your company. The IRS is trying to cut down on the number of applications and the paperwork that they're processing. The guidance that we gave in the earlier seminar about, if you are making an application for the PPP money, we strongly recommend a separate bank account. Why is that? Because this is a two-step process. The first step of the process is determining eligibility, receiving the funds, which you can then utilize for the forgivable items. There's going to be an application on the backside of this that we haven't got a lot of guidance on yet, but it's coming, and that will be an application for loan forgiveness. And you have to prove that you used the money for those categories. My concern is that if you put the PPP money into a commingled account with other monies, that you're not going to be able to sufficiently demonstrate that the money was used in the proper categories. And in the webinar we did earlier with clients, one of the clients actually asked a question about, should we hold off on other property, buying other property and things like that during this time period? And my recommendation is if you don't have separate bank accounts, yes, absolutely hold off. That's why I want you to do the separate bank account. So in the bank account with the normal receipts you have from the business, you can still do the things that you need to do. But I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on the forgiveness side of this. And I'm telling people to document. And so in my particular case, I've already set up a separate bank account. The bank pushed back a little bit on me. They didn't really want to set up another account. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I want another account. So they set it up. And I'm going to only spend money out of that account for payroll, rent, and utilities. That's it for the next 8 weeks. I'll close the account in a couple months after everything's cleared. I'll get a couple of really good bank statements, copies of the checks, all that sort of stuff to document that I spent that money on forgivable categories. Because I know that there's going to be another application process coming up for forgiveness. And I don't want to be denied forgiveness for these monies, if possible, because I'm going to use them the way that they were intended. Among the colleagues that I communicate with, there is a lot of concern that if you go out and buy a new Yukon Denali while you have this money sitting in your bank account, that there could be trouble. And I even had one practitioner refer to that as they think that's clear indices of fraud. You're taking this loan subject to SBA and fraud requirements. Your application absolutely says if you don't spend the money on these categories, it can be considered fraud. So I would be really, really mindful of that and be smart about this. This isn't intended to be a windfall for businesses. This is intended to be money to keep people employed. Now, one of the other things that has come up is because of the extension and enhancement of the unemployment benefits that are out there, some people may not want to come back to work even though you've offered them a position to come back. In that event, document it and send emails. And if you have phone conversations with the employee, follow up with an email so you can lay out what the conversation was and what happened. So because if you remember the forgiveness part of it when it concerns employees, is that you're not penalized if you keep your people employed and you don't cut their pay. But if somebody is refusing to come back to work, you're going to potentially be penalized on the forgiveness side of that. And so what you need to do is document that. The communications between you, the fact you offered them to return to work, the dates that you offered them to return to work, et cetera. Because the rules are set up that if you've had to lay somebody off, but you bring them back within 30 days, you're not penalized under this provision. But if they refuse to come back, you have to document it in order to protect the forgiveness aspect of your loan. So this guidance we had is essentially, if you're a sole proprietor, you can qualify, and the forgiveness will include your owner's compensation based upon 8 weeks of your average of your profit. So you take your profit, divide it by 52, multiply it by 8. That's your forgiveness. I have a client who receives a management fee. We had to quickly put together a Schedule C for him yesterday so he could send it in. He doesn't have a lot of other expenses. So he's actually having to make a decision about how much to borrow, because the formula for your eligibility is higher than 8 weeks, which is your forgiveness. So remember, it's a 2.5 months versus 8 weeks. And so he may actually end up taking the lower amount so that he can ensure that all the money is going to be forgiven. Because he doesn't, at this point, he wasn't interested in borrowing additional funds that he had to pay back. So that's really where we're at right now with things. Is big banks are really struggling with this. The SBA is out of money. They're not taking applications right now. Hopefully you got a place in line and you submitted paperwork. This has been a huge process, a huge bureaucratic process. This loan didn't exist until 10 days ago, and it's been managed by an agency that has 5,000 employees across the country. So it's really a lot of people pulling heavy workloads to try to get this money out and through. So be patient. If you have a relationship with your bank, ask a question or two, but don't be annoying pests, because they're working their butts off to try to get this money out to you guys. I guess the most important message that I can convey right now is we are in some uncertain times, but use this time. How many times in your life have you ever had the opportunity to sit back and really reflect and think and plan? And the people that adapt, the people that change, the people that recognize new opportunities are going to be the one that thrive when we come out of this. And we're coming out of it. Right? There's no doubt about that. We're going to come out of this. We're a little uncertain on the timeline, but it's going to happen. So make the best of yourself during this period of time and do what you want to do. Make your business what you want it to be, not what you feel maybe like you've been trapped or stuck in. And let's rock this when we come out of it, and just really use the best of time. Keep your family safe and healthy. Hug them. Enjoy the time with them. I know everybody's quarantined, and maybe you're getting sick of your neighbors, right? Your family right now, but it's really a blessing. So take advantage of it. If you guys have any questions, you can reach me at bwillie@americantbp.com, and I will do my best to answer them for clients and colleagues. We'll try to do this next week. Hopefully, we'll do a webinar next week, and it will involve additional funds being released and perhaps some updated stats on how much money has been released into the marketplace, and maybe we'll stop losing 5 million jobs a week, and we can start turning that curve around a little bit. But take care of you, and if I can be of any assistance at all, please let me know. Thanks.